streaming. Hello, and welcome to Hubbub, your place of seemingly random information that is yet oh so connected. More to that later. Anyway, today, this is the introduction to video, and depending on whether or not this gets good feedback, talking about the SCIM standard. For those of you not familiar with SCIM, SCIM stands for System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. So what does that mean? Well, if you are familiar with identity providers, IT systems, think of large corporations. When you begin working for them, you become an employee, you are entered into a database, right? You have your name, maybe your date of birth, you have an associated username so that you can use specific, your corporation's network. You can have access to the intranet, the internet, but the intranet of the company. So you need a piece of data that describes you as an employee of that organization. And so where SCIM comes into the picture is when you want to start using other applications. You want to use other types of services. And in the world that we live in, as we tend to go toward, instead of this fully functional, huge, gigantic, enterprise system with all things built into it, there's a concept in development world that we're going toward microservices. So we build a single modular application that takes care of one thing and one thing only, and it does that thing very well. And with more modern tools emerge, then you have continuous development, continuous integration. You have options for parallelization, so you can start multiplying or replicating that specific microservice, and then you get into the intricacies of how cloud computing and how you can group computers to be one logical unit to accomplish one thing. So anyway, to get back into what we were talking about, with the advent of microservices and these little tiny applications, let's say that you are a corporation, right? And you have, let's say 100,000 people, and you want to onboard them for, in this example, let's just say Slack. Now, with 100,000 people, let's say maybe at least half of them are actually on desk. Some are deskless workers. So what is the most efficient way to onboard 100,000 users onto a Slack application? And currently, you would have to figure a way how to get the word out. Say we're now using Slack for our communication method of internal communications and Teams. So sign up for it. That can get problematic pretty quickly. Let's say the next day someone gets fired, someone quits. Someone goes on extended leave and doesn't need access to it. So we're talking about two different systems that are managing the same person. So you have your corporation that's managing your person, and then you have now this, this Slack area with that same person. And so that's where the problem comes in, is when you cannot keep a synchronization between data, when there is going to be some point of fault that you can't account for. And so this is what SCIM is aiming to alleviate, is that the problem of how do you efficiently manage user identities in the cloud between many different services. So what SCIM allows is for a centralized location of user identities and an easy to use open API so that other identity providers or other types of services can consume user identities, use them for their system, but also what the really cool part is, it keeps the synchronization between those two stores or those two providers. So let's look at an example with the Slack. So, we had the old scenario. Now let's do SCIM scenario. All right, I decide I own a company. I have 100,000 users, and I'm gonna make it easy. I want all my people in my company to start using it, by next week. So we go to the SCIM provisioning setup for Slack. We find the right endpoint to target at. We provide some information on our data, on our identity store, and the goal of SCIM is that on their side, they're going to make specific REST calls that will expose our company's identities using a predefined schema that represents a user identity as per SCIM standard. So, there's a lot that goes into this. So I'm trying to gauge whether or not this would be useful for people to know. So, that was a little preview. If we go further with this, I'd like to actually go through a little bit more in depth regarding the format of the schema for SCIM, going over some of the identity providers for SCIM that are available currently, and also possibly answer questions. So, the reason why I'm talking about SCIM is I work with SCIM a lot, and I figured this might be able to help both me and someone else that's curious about SCIM, because this is out there and it provides an answer to a problem that's pretty hard. It's not too hard, but it can get pretty hard once it scales up. As your user base increases, complexity increases, probably at a directly proportional, probably even more. It's a direct proportional, but I'm saying is that as you increase people, the complexities, it's just, this will solve the problem. SCIM is a very nice system that has been designed, and it's been around since 2011. It has been around since 2011. There is a new spec that's been released in 2015. There are several identity providers that are implementing it currently, and you can look them up yourself. Salesforce, there's Office 365, apps for work, there's Facebook, there's Microsoft, Okta, Ping. There's quite a sizable amount. The reason why nobody is probably hearing about this is that these are like infrastructure of companies, like of their employees. So this is kind of like the background stuff. Nobody's probably aware or probably even cares about. Nobody's really concerned with a user identity inside a corporation, unless you're somebody that is managing that, and is responsible for assigning roles and assigning things. So anyway, that was just a brief introduction. Depending on how this goes, I'll gauge it from there, and then we can get a little bit more in depth with what SCIM does, maybe answer some questions, and like I said before, just kind of get a little bit more in depth. It's a lot there. If you search for it on Google, you'll probably come up with simplecloud.info. It gives you kind of like, this is SCIM, this is a schema, these are the endpoints. Or you could look up the SCIM spec, the protocol, which is, that's a monster too. So if I can help in any way, just let me know. And it also gives me practice to You know, so it kind of helps both ways. We can help each other. That's the main thing. Anyway, hope you have a good day and hope to hear from everybody soon.